It's 3:30. I see more and more people hopping in, which is fantastic. I'm so excited. Lots of familiar names and some unfamiliar names as well. So I will start off by introducing myself. My name is Ali Ibaraken. I'm the founder of Chapperone, which is a student trip management platform. I was a teacher for 14 years. I used to teach physics. And I was actually a dean of students as well, and worked at an independent school in Brooklyn, Packer Collegiate Institute, for those of you who might know it. And I'm really excited to have you all here today. I'm hoping that the next hour is going to be a really kind of fruitful discussion where we get to chat all about the intricacies of leading trips and the fun and the challenges that come with that. We have an incredible panel today, and I'm so grateful for you to join us. And I'm going to start off by introducing our esteemed panelists. So we have Gillian Johnson, who is the Director of Global Engagement at the Pingree School in Basking Ridge, New Jersey. Gillian began leading trips while teaching undergraduate students of Spanish at the University of Virginia, traveling to Costa Rica and Spain for language immersion programs. At Pingree, Gillian supports and runs a number of language exchange programs, as well as domestic and international programs centered on sustainability, art, culture, social justice, and more. Thank you so much, Gillian. And then we have Elena Alvarez, who is the Director of Global and Community Engagement at the Dalton School in New York. As an independent school alumna who had a transformative experience with experiential travel during her high school years, she seeks to create similar transformative experiences for her students. At Dalton, Elena oversees a number of K-12 co-curriculars, including global programs, service learning, and high school internships. So thank you so much, Elena, for joining us. And then we also have Bella Dupreez, who is the Senior VP at World of Difference, a South African-based travel partner where she has been working for the last 9 years. She is a mum of 3 and lives and works in Cape Town and is very proudly South African. She is passionate about experiential learning and creating equal opportunities for students across the globe to not only make a difference in programs and communities, but also to see the lives of the students radically changed for the better as well. She says it's the reason behind her 9 years of commitment to World of Difference. So thank you so much, Bella, who, by the way, it is, was it 10:30 in the evening in Cape Town? So thank you for being here this evening. And then last but not least, we have Fiorella Calderoni, who is the Vice President at Insight Global Education, where she helps lead a small team that designs and delivers international programs for middle and high school students from across the US and Canada. Fiorella is passionate about creating meaningful travel experiences that help young people see the world and themselves in new ways. She believes that thoughtful travel can be one of the most powerful classrooms in the world. So thank you so much, Fio, for being here and sharing that. I love that. I do think kind of exploring the world is one of the most powerful things that we can offer our students. And I think everybody probably here agrees with me, which is why we're spending our Thursday afternoon on a webinar talking about student trips. I'm going to very quickly go over the plan for today. So we have really just kind of an overview here, which will give us 4 different themes. We're going to go through those themes. I'm going to ask our incredible panelists questions. We're going to end with some quick fire questions. And then hopefully, if we have time, we'll get to Q&A. I know we're going to have so much to talk about in the next 55 minutes. So I can't promise we're going to get to Q&A, but we're going to try our hardest. Please feel free to pop any questions in the chat, and then we'll try and get to it towards the end. So without further ado, oh no, that's not what I want. There we go. Let's crack on and discuss all of these incredible things that we have to think about when it comes to supporting our trip leaders. So I'm curious, Gillian and Elena, I'm going to start with you two. I wonder if you could speak a little bit about what you both do at your schools in terms of trip leader training. I know that there can be quite a challenge in terms of balancing, providing enough support and training without overwhelming. and how you think about making sure everybody has the key priorities you want to share.
Great. Jillian, did you want to go first? All right, I'll start. Again, my name is Elena Alvarez, Director of Global and Community Engagement at Dalton. I am 3 years into this role at Dalton, and while the program has been longstanding, it's been under a couple of different phases of development. So I knew when I started 3 years ago that we really needed to get all of the adults on the trip. We have trip leaders, we have chaperones, under kind of like the same roof with regards to roles and responsibilities. So we started implementing first and foremost a risk management training hosted by an outside provider. Mostly it's IGL, formerly GEBG. We do that in the winter every year before our trips go out. And that's really so everybody gets a baseline understanding of what we're looking for as far as risk management goes. I also, before that, try to sit down with the trip leaders at least once, just so they're aware of how the next following months are going to go before they even take their trips out. As far as roles, responsibilities, what next steps are, what you need to be looking out for. And when the chaperones come in, we do the same exact thing. I meet with every chaperone team, kind of outline roles and responsibilities. We have a lot of groups in recent years who are like brand new to global travel, period, and are eager with questions and are eager to learn. So I'm fortunate in that I don't feel like I'm, kind of shoving information down anybody's throat at this point. But yeah, I think being a consistent source for them from pre-trip through post-trip, setting expectations early, and just giving them all the information that they need and being an open door, while allowing them still to do what they want and need to do from a curricular sense and a programmatic sense.
You mentioned, Allie, without it being overwhelming. I will say I'm one of the people who's in the camp of it's okay to make them a little afraid. These are other people's children that they're traveling with, that they're responsible for, and it's also the school's reputation that's on the line. So a little fear is okay. But by the time that I finish doing my training with them, I'm hoping that our trip leaders feel empowered, even if they still have a dash of fear. So the first few years that I was in this role, like Elena, I was using GBG, IGL to run some of the risk management workshops, which was really helpful because it was still quite COVID-y and nobody had the answers, and definitely not me. But as I've been in the role longer, I've found that it's really helpful to do the training in-house, because we have so many policies that are Pingree specific, and we have ways that Pingree wants our trip leaders to respond to emergencies. And it's really helpful to be able to walk them through our handbook during that time. So I actually, also in the wintertime, I managed to grab a day. It's a school day, and I managed to get the upper school and middle school directors on board with this, where I take a whole day to go through risk management training with all of the global programs and travel spring intensive trip leaders. I think that's really helped because it's then put an emphasis, like we're spending a whole school day to talk about this. In advance of being on site, we send our trip leaders off with binders. And so I prepare the binders that they will have with them on the trip, that has their itinerary outlined, that has the trip leader manual with all of the most important policies are at the very tippy top. The most severe crisis, all of that is outlined. And so I like to have them look at that binder that they'll have with them on the trip so that they can then work through scenarios. The end of the day is reserved for scenarios so that they can then say, okay, this happens. how does Pingree want me to respond? And so then they can use the binder that's in their hands and they can start getting comfortable with it. Towards the end of the binder, I also have a risk management assessment that I have our trip leaders do. And I have them do it during that day. So it feels like doing homework in class. It's very practical. And so, you know, if you're taking a trip to Belize, what are the risks associated with your program? And I have the trip leaders write those out and then think about already, how is it that you're going to mitigate those risks in the field? And then both before and after this big risk management day, I also have periodic, maybe once a month or every 6 weeks, have meetings with my trip leaders where we'll go through everything from how to score applications to how to create a budget or managing itineraries and so forth. So I do also have regular touch-ins with them.
That's amazing. That's so great that you're actually able to kind of get a whole day dedicated to that time. I'm sure that's hugely appreciated. And so bravo for getting that. Theo and Bella, I'm curious kind of from your point of view as travel partners, like you've worked with hundreds of schools. How do you define kind of the role of a trip leader, and how do you see that kind of working best alongside kind of what you guys do when you're leading in the field as well?
I'm happy to jump in here. Thanks, Ellie. So I think for us, it really comes down to a few things. Firstly, just having really like absolute clarity, passionate educators and kind of passionate delivery, and having that kind of real-time alignment when we're in field. So I think firstly, we have a kind of mandatory pre-trip meeting with the trip leaders specifically. And I know, Elena, you mentioned kind of roles and responsibilities quite a lot. So obviously we've also got roles and responsibilities for our staff in field. And so aligning on kind of those that have been outlined for educators from the school side, those that we have, and kind of how we can collectively work together in field to ensure that it's not only kind of course, a safe experience, but that we're kind of gaining those outcomes and providing an amazing trip for the students. So and then I think also just passion, right? Like we don't just want to be kind of ticking things off the list and like you do this, you do that. It's kind of bringing together people who are really, really passionate and kind of committed to the experience. And I think that's what really drives that kind of superior student engagement, right? Like if we're really passionate, students are going to be passionate, and just kind of aligning on that, I think is really important. And then I think lastly, there's lots of things, but I think the last key thing is just transparency. So kind of in field, having those regular check-ins for us kind of daily to keep things ticking and operating. So constantly aligning, building that trust to be able to solve issues and kind of guarantee success on all fronts in field. So I think those are the main things from our side.
I would second everything Bella said, especially the need to understand and have clarity around the roles in pre-departure. That's really what helps the most, because when you're trying to figure it out on program, it doesn't go as smoothly as you might think. So for us at Insight, we really view chaperones or trip leaders as kind of the bridge between the school community and the student experience itself. Our trip leaders, we know most of them, some of them are admin and whatnot, but they're educators first. They often have curricular goals that they're trying to meet. They're of course responsible for student health and well-being, but also connection. A lot of the point of these trips is for them to create connection. And so how we view our role then in order to support that is just to remove any friction possible. So we're handling operations, communication with local partners, risk management systems. For us, kind of that support needs piece means providing clarity. So making sure that they have the right information at the right time, that there are clear escalation pathways as needed, and that they're confident that they're not alone. So that's how I think I would explain it for us.
I love that. I think it's so important to have those conversations and And I think this actually leads quite nicely into my next question, which is around the difference between kind of veteran trip leaders and first-time trip leaders, and how you kind of differentiate the support and hand-holding that you offer those.
Yeah, I'm happy to continue a little bit, and then Bella can jump in. So we do take a slightly different approach. We always have an insight facilitator on program, and so that insight facilitator will take the lead more frequently when the trip leader is new or a little bit less confident, with things like making sure we're doing risk check-ins at the beginning of the day, that we're choosing a student leader, that we are saying thank yous to partner, like all of that stuff can be started by our facilitator very easily. Whereas when we have veteran trip leaders, we often find that they're happy and enthusiastic to join that process and take part in what's going to be our question of the day and how are we going to do the dialogue and all of that kind of stuff. So I would say with new trip leaders, we're often providing more of that structure, whereas veteran trip leaders obviously are used to a bit of autonomy and just are more confident, and so are often just willing and enthusiastic about getting involved.
I would say from the school perspective, when I do the training of my trip leaders, the vets and the newbies all come to the same training. So I don't actually differentiate. Things are changing all the time. There's always new emerging risks. We constantly update our policies. And so even folks who have run many, many trips, it's still a job to stay on top of, what is the policy regarding XYZ these days. As you know, the world is changing all the time. And so again, there's new emerging risks that we have to wrap our arms around and constantly monitor. I've been really fortunate that the veteran trip leaders that I've worked with at my school have been fantastic. Like, have had a really good attitude about showing up to these trainings. And maybe it's the day off of teaching. Maybe it's getting to have some pastries in the morning. I'm not sure. But they want to do a good job, and they want to be well versed, and they want to have the confidence in the field that they're going to do the right thing. And they are also really happy to share their experiences, good, bad, or ugly, from what they've experienced before. And we take them as, opportunities. We often talk about real life things that happened and how they dealt with it, whether it was the right way or maybe one of the wrong ways, whatever. But that's actually really helpful.
That's so interesting, like sharing with the stories, and some horror stories, some good stories, whatever it is. I'm wondering as well, like when you're on the trip, there's so much noise, there's so much that trip leaders are kind of triaging and managing. I'm wondering if anyone has any kind of supports or systems that they have in place for trip leaders to kind of ease some of that stress, I suppose during the trip, but also if anything kind of pre-trip as well.
Yeah, I can maybe jump in here. I think you guys are really busy as educators, and we fully appreciate that. We spent some time speaking about that earlier, about how crazy the schedules are, and there's just so many different things that you need to consider. And so I think pre-trip, we try to take as much off your plate as we possibly can with, helping to collect documents and helping to create a system that is easy to navigate. So we've got like an experience portal similar to what Ali has as well, where essentially you can just have students sending things to us directly. So ideally, we're trying to change your job as a trip leader from kind of logistic management and chasing signatures and emailing families 1,000 times a week to follow up on documents and information, to really being the kind of motivator and like, this is exciting versus like, I'm nagging you again. And I know you've all been there. It's a really challenging role. So we recognize that, and we want to try kind of take that burden off pre-trip. But then maybe on the ground, I think, we try to take that risk burden off of trip leaders. We kind of have that knowledge on the ground. We have that infrastructure to be able to take on that kind of 24/7 risk profile, which I think alleviates a lot of the pressure from the trip leaders. So I think, doing that vendor coordination, making sure that we have everything in place before you come, so that really all you guys have to support with is that group dynamic and engagement. Because again, it's some students come and they're incredibly engaged and they really want to kind of gain so much from the experience, and then others might not. And so just helping to kind of keep that group dynamic going, so that everyone connects with the experience. So yeah, I think those would be the two main things to add from my side.
Something that Dalton does, as of my time here, has been to take the parent communication piece off of trip leaders and groups' hands, really for two reasons. Again, we want their jobs to be focused on the students and the programming. While abroad, that is their job, not, putting out the fires with parents. And also, I learned when I came here initially that there's a very active parent body. And, the games of telephone can very quickly get out of hand should something go wrong, right? So I wanted to make sure whenever something happens, we were all aligned as the Dalton school as to what exactly happened, what needs to happen next, what our, stance or whatever is. So we have taken pretty much all parent communication off of trip leaders' hands, starting from like the initial student acceptance period, through payments and registration, to, while on the trip, should something happen, trip leaders first come to us. We call it the home office, which I could explain in a little bit. But basically, it's me, my supervisor, and the divisional principal. And we triangulate issues there. And then Dalton, the home office, reaches out to parents. Our trip leaders are never, ever tasked with reaching out to parents. And parents know well in advance that trip leaders are going to be mostly unreachable. So they need to contact us.
Yeah, amazing. I remember dealing with parents once, and somebody emailed me when I was on a trip about their child needing another pillow. And I was like, come on. Right, moving on to, talking of emergencies, you don't have enough pillows. Moving on to the next theme being kind of risk management and emergency preparedness. So I think this is something that people often kind of jump to when they think about kind of training their trip leaders. And I'm wondering about kind of what information do you want your trip leaders to always have access to? Elena and Fia, I wonder if you could kind of share some of your insights into this.
Yeah, of course. So we prepare much like Jillian does, kind of like a dossier pre-trip with all of the information, all the names, all the numbers. So just thinking off the top of my head, it is the names of numbers of the home office back at Dalton, phone numbers and emails, so folks know about that. We create a WhatsApp as well, so we're easily reachable to them. The names and numbers of our international support system, which is International SOS for us. So they have all of those, 24/7 telephone lines. They have the name, email, and phone number of an immigration lawyer as of late, which is like Dalton's newest acquisition to the legal team. So they know just in case anything goes left at the airport, they have to contact the immigration lawyer. What else? Student profiles as far as health and wellness, medications, any afflictions, itinerary matters. They have the names and numbers of the support system or the support team from our vendor side as well. So they always have access on that end. I think that's everything. Feel my jolt of memory in my head.
So I was thinking, I was trying to put myself, because I've been, in the field with students, and I've definitely seen trip leaders that carry like the 60-pound backpacks every day, which is not ideal either. And so I was trying to think of like, what is like truly, truly essential, where like on every activity you would need this. For me, what popped up, allergy and health info. Allergies are so key. Even when you think you know them and you know the roster, it's so important to have them with you. And obviously it's not just food, but like allergies to medications. If there's an injury, you got to have those with you and available all the time. And I think what I would add to that is that pre-trip, they need to be verified, because the number of times that we either had inconsistent information or the nurse didn't have the same information at school or whatever that might be. So it really has to be verified health and diet info. I'm trying to think of what else I might add there. I would say the other thing that comes to mind is one of those extra little battery packs for your phone. That's really important. And a lot of times when trip leaders have needed support, they either ran out of battery or they've used it's the end of the day, whatever it might be, but those come in really handy. So I guess in terms of day to day, that's what I would say.
That's a great call. I feel like emergencies always happen when you're down to like your final 10% of battery, never on a fully charged battery. Maybe that should be the advice. Always make sure your phone is fully charged, and then an emergency will never happen. I'm wondering, other than that, Gillian and Bella, I'm curious if you have any kind of protocols or systems that you have in place or that you can share with folk around kind of this is what to do if there's an emergency or an unexpected event. Oh, Gillian, you're on mute.
You're on mute.
Oops. You would think I would know. 5 years in. Like I was describing before, we have a manual that is shrunken, so it shouldn't weigh 60 pounds, Fio, but it is a shrunken but very important handbook that's like goes from the most severe, like somebody gets murdered on the trip and who do you call, down to more minor things. And so, hopefully nobody ever has to look at the first 2 or 3 pages. And we also, like Elena was describing at Pingree, we also work with ISOS. And so we have that support in the field. This might be slightly veering off to the side, but it's a risk management policy that is, people might not see it as a risk management policy, but in my mind, it very much is, and helps make our programs successful, is that we have a no cell phone policy on all of our programs, whether they're domestic, international, or exchange programs. And we get some parent pushback for sure. I'm hoping that we get a little bit less this year because we've now gone cell phone free during the day. But if there's something that goes sideways in the field and your kids are posting about it, like just so much more to handle. And so I've really, and I now have a lot of parents who are like, thank you for taking their phones, and the students too. And so I actually see that as a huge, not only are they more engaged in the material, they're engaging with the people who are around them, whether they're Pingree people or whether it's the locals. They're actually engaged with the subject matter. And if something should go wrong, we have a better handle on what our response will be.
Okay. Yeah, gosh, I think risk is so difficult. I think the nature of what we do on many of these trips, can be risky. And so I think that's something that we take really, really seriously, is just trying to, again, take on that kind of risk profile. And I think this is where kind of 26 years in the business pays off. We've seen some really, really gnarly stuff. We've seen earthquakes, the global pandemic, lots of different things. So tried and tested kind of protocols, risk assessments, emergency action plans that we have in place that get reviewed regularly. We are very mindful that as educators, you guys trust us, and you kind of make a decision to say we're choosing you, and then you're putting that forward to the parent body, right? So like the parents trust that you're making the right decision, and that, you know, that's a really difficult position to be in. And so we want to make sure that it's a kind of confident decision. And so we've got the risk assessments, the emergency action plans, which we share with you guys kind of during that approval process. We want you to be comfortable that those are kind of rigorous enough and that they're clear. But also when the kind of group arrives, make sure that we're doing the training. So, you know, like before we do anything else, like, hey, these are the risks, these are the emergency action plans, staff, students, educators, everyone needs to know. We obviously don't want to instill fear. That's not the goal. But also, you know, responsibility is key here. So kind of presenting it in a way where there's an awareness. And I think that's the most important thing. And then, yeah, we kind of regularly run simulations on our side to desensitize the team, because it's very easy to like really screw up an emergency scenario and how we handle it when emotions are involved, right? So I think for us specifically, and I think this is also why, yes, absolutely, we want educators to support us during the emergency, but like we're the experts here, like help us. And that's where the roles and responsibilities come in that I mentioned earlier. You know, we go into detail about the risk element, like when there's an emergency, this is ideally how we need the support and what we need. And, you know, can we align, what are the expectations from your institution side, and kind of how can we make sure that what we're skilled in, we can kind of run with, and what you're skilled in, you can run with. And together as a team, we can mitigate and kind of navigate any potential scenarios. So yeah, it's a really tricky one, right? It's a really difficult one, because it's trust. And it's a lot of the times emergencies are things that are completely outside of your control. So yeah.
It's always a scary moment taking students off into the field, and so much of it is around communication, like you're saying there. And there's also the aspect of communicating back with the administration back at school. And, you know, I think there's the option of, you know, what are the things that you see that are like a drop everything, immediately communicate with admin, they need to know there and then. What are the things that the admin need to know at the end of the trip, perhaps, in a feedback? And what are the things that admin don't need to know about? I wonder, Elena and Theo, from your two perspectives, if you have any kind of anything you might want to share about that.
Yeah, so at Dalton, we kind of have like a tiered system for communication. So as I mentioned, we have what's known as like the home office, which is me, my immediate supervisor, and the principal, the divisional principal. Those two folks are members of the senior admin team. So if anything, they will escalate beyond our group. But in essence, each trip has access to the three of us via a WhatsApp group. That WhatsApp group is open, you know, 24/7. They could throw anything in there, but I've kind of simplified it by color coding issues for them, which they all know ahead of time. So the system is red, yellow, and green. Things like a red call are like threat to life or limb, loss of life, severe emotional trauma. And they know if it's a red call, they have to call emergency services first, they have to call ISOS second, and then they are calling us. They know that. Things like a yellow call, where it's like, okay, emergency hospital visit, evacuation, a non-negotiable violation of norms, parents need to be contacted, or something that like requires like immediate advice. Let's say like it's a immigration call. They know to call other party first, and then they're going to get in contact with us. Things that are green are mostly non-emergency things, but could escalate. So we call those mostly near misses, or otherwise things that could wait for a response. I'm trying to think of like a recent near miss. We had a student in France last year think that she was getting ill from an apparatus left in overnight, and that's all I'll say about that. So she wanted to see a doctor, and so we got her that doctor. Did we know if she had TSS? No, but we wanted to get her a doctor anyway. So it's things like that, or you know, maybe a student duo is on the outs and it's affecting rooming. Like, how do you want to proceed? They have access to us for that stuff. So again, our like little team will triangulate any issue, basically. A lot of times it's left to me to do like the more minor stuff. Admin will step in for larger stuff. And especially when it comes to like formulating a advance notice or a response, perhaps to parents for like those near misses that could be, you know, greatly exaggerated once the kids get their phones. We mostly have the kids' phones away for the duration of the trip, but you know, they do have access to them. So we make sure that we are out ahead of the kids on anything that they experience.
I love that red, orange, and green system. That's really smart.
Ours sounds really similar. I bet a lot of us have traffic light systems. We also do the same thing. I guess where we would start is we do a very thorough risk assessment specific to each program. So within that risk assessment, there are 4 sections. There's just general travel risks that are always going to exist. Risk specific to the location that they're going to, risk specific to the program, the actual activities that they're doing in that location, and then risk specific to the roster. What's specific about this group that could present risks on this program? So within that risk assessment, we include like what scenarios might be, how we might mitigate them, how we plan to mitigate them, and then if something did happen, how we plan to respond. And the reason that's important is hopefully when we share them, schools are reading them and we're all on the same page. They're meant to be collaborative, they're living documents. And so hopefully that plan is okay with everybody that it's been shared with and adjustments have been made and we have a plan of action already. Within that risk assessment, there's a very like brief, easy to follow 7-step decision-making framework that we encourage our facilitators to use. And it's not until I think like step 3 or 4 where they're actually informing somebody. So it's always student first, information second. For us specifically, we never communicate directly with families. So we ensure that all communication is going through the school and that the school is able to disseminate that information as needed, unless of course it's exigent circumstances for some reason. Similar to what Elena mentioned, we have a WhatsApp group. We have found WhatsApp to be the most reliable in the most places and really easy to use and the most widely shared, I would say, by our partners as well. And within that WhatsApp group, we actually do require daily updates. So even if there wasn't a yellow or a red, just how did your day go? Just it can be very brief, but just a daily update. And sometimes there's stuff that maybe didn't get escalated, but that we wanted a little bit more information on. And so that helps us stay on top of stuff as well. And our crisis response team is 24/7 anytime students are in the field. So they're checking that every day, making sure we've received that update. If there ever is a yellow or a red, an incident report is required. We share that incident report with the school. This is what happened and this is how we responded. And then following the program, we are happy to schedule a debrief as well, because these are huge learning moments for us and nobody's perfect. So what happened? How did we manage it? How could we manage it in the future? Was there anything we should have done differently and so on? So those are what comes to mind.
Love that. I think, hopefully, we have to be super prepared for emergencies and risk. It's what we always think about, but fingers crossed there's going to not be anything kind of that worrying or that drastic happen. But something that will definitely always happen is trip leaders having to manage students' social emotional well-being, which is possibly more scary than some of these riskier things. And I'm wondering, kind of something that we so often hear about is kind of like little issues escalating, especially around student well-being. Gillian and Theo, do you have any kind of ways that you help your trip leaders think about this, or how to be a bit more proactive when looking at the small things, knowing that sometimes they add up to the larger things?
Yeah, I think first step is really having your trip leaders get to know the group. I think, having a baseline of who the students are that you're with, what their personality is like, how they get along with each other. I think that's really key, because that may or may not be how they present in the field. And so if you're able to kind of get that baseline look, I also, in thinking back about risk management, another thing that we do, somebody mentioned this, whenever we have our preliminary lists of folks that we want to take on trips, we have those lists vetted by a large number of people, some of whom are our counselors and our deans, DIB. And so we're sort of able to, the deans, for example, might clue us into a situation with a couple of students that might not be a problem, but they have some history. And so we'll just get that history on those folks before we travel with them. And sometimes it isn't an issue at all, but at least we have that knowledge in case it were to become something. We also, I think in the risk management training, I also have built in, and I think Ali, you saw this, scenarios where, let's say you've taken a group to Greece and it's the first night and a child is not eating anything at dinner and she says she doesn't like Greek food. Okay, right? But now let's say it's the morning of day 3 or the morning of day 4. What now? And so if you have your trip leaders start thinking about, okay, here's day 1, but how would your response then change if she's still not eating? I'll just tell one little anecdote. One trip that we run very frequently is our marine ecology program in Belize, and we have a really experienced trip leader who runs that program. She's a boss. And one of her students, the last time that she ran the program, had gone to graduation outside to see her sister graduate. And then a couple days later went on the program to Belize. Well, since she was outside in a little sundress, she had burnt shoulders when she went to Belize. And had our trip leader not been so vigilant, that little sunburn could have turned into something quite nasty because they were outside, like 8 hours a day in Belize. And so she had a rash guard on her all the time and was really just stayed on top of it. But that could be something that could have devolved into something way worse had it not been cared for.
I love that.
I think everything Jillian said, but also I'm trying to think of what to add. So that yellow light mindset that I touched on, those daily check-ins are really helpful. I think the other thing is we build reflection time into each day. And that reflection time really there's insight there into how the students are doing, because there's different ways to engage, whether it's journaling or talking or an activity. But if they're not engaging with any of it, something's probably wrong. And I find that is really helpful at the end of the day.
I think something that can be quite daunting to teachers when they go off and be trip leaders is this idea of being responsible for students' kind of holistic well-being. And they're not mental health experts, and kind of there are more and more issues arising with students on trips like this. I'm curious if there's any tools or frameworks that you know or that you use to help teachers feel a bit more equipped to support students.
So I will be the first to admit that we as a school have a bit of a way to go to really get our trip leaders equipped around issues of mental health and well-being. What we are doing currently, and this is concurrent with our health and wellness office, is we're mandating all of our teachers, not just the ones who are going on trips, to do a training around the signs of suicidality and suicidal ideation and prevention. That's part and parcel of like the general training that everybody needs to do, along with like mandated reporter and the sexual harassment training that we all do in order to like be at the school. So that's one part of it. There's also, and this is something that I probably will be adopting for this year, but the IGL a couple of years ago came out with a really great tool that is kind of a self-evaluation of sorts for students to kind of assess like what are their potential triggers, how might they react if they haven't gotten good sleep, if they are hungry, if their routine is interrupted, and like really ask them to assess like how they respond to those matters and what they need in that moment. which would then be shared with trip leadership and with us. So I think that's a really good benchmark for data collection around our groups. And finally, like as a resource, I know ISOS has access to mental health practitioners the same way that they do for regular health practitioners. So folks are always encouraged to call in if they see anything. Our counselors can only do so much because of the distance, because of the time difference, because, you know, this isn't necessarily somebody that they might be treating back at school. They're there as a resource, but they're not always the first line of defense.
Yeah, I think it's a tricky one because, you know, none of us are therapists. And I think, you know, having to kind of have that expectation to provide support is valid. And so, you know, I know all of our staff do mental health first aid training, and I believe that's something that's widely available and kind of accessible. And so potentially, especially because I know with medical forms and kind of collecting that information up front, oftentimes there's an awareness of potential issues that could arise based on the kind of medical portfolio. And so potentially paying a bit more attention if required, because we know there's potentially a couple more students that do struggle with mental health challenges that are joining this trip. So I think just kind of being more aware and doing some potential courses to equip educators. But on our side, we train our staff, and then we also have an in-house organizational psychologist, because the reality is, you know, we can only do so much, and then we do need, you know, support from the experts. And so that's available to students, to staff on our programs. And there's obviously a process that we go through to kind of identify the need and when best to bring in the resource if required. And yeah, I think there's also, it's all very relevant to the specific scenario, right? Because there's also a recognition that students are oftentimes likely more comfortable with the educator versus just kind of talking to our staff or maybe talking to this outside representative. So I think depending on the kind of scale of the challenge is kind of trying to support, with the knowledge that we have, trying to support you as educators and trip leaders, and working alongside the kind of team back home, you know, like Elena and Julian, who are sitting in the home office, like how can we together kind of approach this situation and scale if required. It's a very delicate one, but one that, you know, I think really does require that attention just to help students feel confident and supported on the program. We've had, you know, many instances, and as you were saying, like it's become more of a topic in more recent years. So definitely something for us to pay a lot more attention to.
I love that. I think, you know, a lot of what we're chatting about here is, you know, obviously there's the trip itself, but kind of laying the foundations before the trip goes out, finding the time to kind of prepare and train people, and having the support back home from the school is so important. And I think that kind of leads us to our final theme, which is trying to kind of build that strong school culture around travel and kind of building and empowering trip leaders. Elena and Gillian, you know, from your school's perspective, what are ways that schools can actually inspire teachers to want to do more trips, especially if they're, you know, they're hesitant to, you know, they've already got too much on, or they're nervous about kind of leading a trip? What do you think schools can do to help that?
You want to take it first?
Go ahead.
I think, you know, one thing that I've done during our PD days at the school is I've lobbied to have our trip leaders present programs that they've done, just share out with the faculty and sort of say, like, here's this trip that I did, and it was so cool because I got to dig in to this topic that I never get to because we're preparing for the AP exam, or fill in the blank, right? Because days are short. And you know, I really got to dig into this topic that is just mentioned tangentially in the textbook, and the students really loved it, and everybody had a great time. And so being able to showcase those things. I've also done little sessions where I say, so you want to run a global program, what would that look like hypothetically? So it's no, you're not signing a contract, just, talk them through, like what would, step 1 look like all the way down to, step 100, whatever, to just walk them through the process. I think also it helps to pay your faculty to run trips and to help them develop the curriculum. And so I'm happy to say that we do have that support for our chaperones. I know that not everyone does, and that can be challenging, but I think that by offering compensation for our trip leaders, we then get really great programs because we have even more investment from the trip leaders. And I will say, I'll see if I can grab it real quick. Another thing that our school recently did is they highlighted, this was like made my year, they highlighted Pingree Global programs on our magazine. And so, super kudos to all the people who ran programs last year. And they were just, like on the front page of this magazine that went out to all families, all alums, everything. And so, I think that was probably like tremendous for them, but also inspiring to other folks.
Yeah, similar to Jillian, I am fortunate in that travel has always been like kind of prized and prioritized at Dalton. So we've had, even before I came in, like a lot of interest from faculty to lead and develop trips. I think that's kind of changed a bit as we kind of like shift our focus beyond, the typical tourism type of trips into deeper, more meaningful engagement experiences. So I, always avail myself as a resource to anybody who might want to talk about a trip. And I set, the expectations very, very low. I'm like, listen, just come in, we'll grab coffee, and you can throw all your ideas at the wall. Like, it's just a space for you and I to ideate and for you to learn more about what we do. You don't have to be intimidated and give me a proposal like right now, right? So I'll work with faculty on this anywhere from like 2 to 5 months before actual proposals are due. I've also tried to, with varying success, to kind of like set up office hours as like a more faculty generated space where folks will like come in and bounce ideas off of each other if they don't want to talk to me, and just ask general questions about the program. We do offer compensation for our trip leaders and chaperones. Is it enough? In my opinion, no. In my opinion, I think trip leaders should get just a smidge more money. But they do have access to scouting funds, which are about $4,000. So once a trip is approved, they get to scout it should they need to. Sometimes they don't, but they feel supported when they get to go out and do that.
That's amazing. Right, we have only a few minutes to go. I knew this was going to happen. We have so much to share, and time is always against us, but I think we can probably do a couple of quick fire questions. And Fia, I wanted to start with your quick question is, what's one pre-trip activity or meeting that you think every group should do?
Okay, I thought of two, but I'll be really quick. One is a gear check, super important. And number two is a community agreement session. We've only had a few schools do this, but when they do, the cohesion and the group dynamics are that much stronger. So meeting about like, what is our trip culture going to be, and what kind of community agreement can we set up?
Amazing, I love that. Elena, what's the most common mistake trip leaders make, and how can it be avoided?
I would say not making time to get to know one another as a trip leader team and not collaborating enough with vendors, representatives who are accompanying you on the trip, and treating them like employees instead of team members.
Love it. Bella, what's one strategy for making students feel safe and included while traveling?
Gosh, just one. There's so many. I think it's just it's creating opportunity for engagement, right? And like one example, for example, is sitting around at dinner and asking a couple questions and getting everyone to share and contribute. And it doesn't have to be complicated, right? So as an educator, facilitating those moments where everyone can kind of come together and feel like they have a space to contribute.
Gillian, your question I'm going to slightly change, because your question I've got here is, how can schools show appreciation to teachers who lead trips? And I also see a question from Becca saying, can we get some people to share the trip stipends for leaders? So that's possibly the answer to that question. But I'm curious, like I know I've heard from my end, working with different schools, it varying from like no stipend all the way up to, you know, $4,000 or $5,000 for a stipend. I'm curious if anybody else has got any insights, if you would be willing to share.
We have a really complicated stipend structure, which is basically like I'll try to simplify it. It's if you work with a third-party provider, you earn a little bit less because you have less responsibility. If you're teaching it as a class where a student can get credit, then you are paid more because you are teaching, and there is a deliverable. So the academic lift is more. So it depends, and also length, but anywhere between 1,000 up to about 4,000.
We pay $250 per DM for both trip leaders and chaperones, and I think there needs to be a distinction between trip leaders and chaperones, given all the setup work that they need to do.
Awesome, amazing. Thank you for sharing that. So I think we've pretty much come to the end of this session, and I really hope that it was, you know, useful for everybody. I'm just going to quickly share with you here that if anybody is interested, we have a discount code here for access to Chapperone, which is a student trip management platform. A lot of you are talking about kind of places to keep resources, trip binders, messaging, so feel free to use that. The other thing I wanted to shout out was that we actually have a free trip planning checklist that's available on the website as well. So some of that kind of pre-trip work that is sometimes on your plate, sometimes on trip leaders, this can sometimes help. But yes, I just wanted to say a massive thank you for everybody coming and joining us. And honestly, a huge thank you to our panelists. You have been incredible, sharing so many amazing insights and tips. So I hope everybody's learned a lot. I know I certainly have. Thank you so much.
You were a great host, Ali. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you guys. Have a good one.